sweaty.
Hello and welcome to the Shenmue Dojo Show Season 5, Episode 2. I am SkillJim, and as always, I'm joined by Matthew, the baby-making Oliver. How's things, man?
The cat's definitely out of the bag there, isn't it? Yeah, I'm good, man. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. I think we did mention it on the last show, didn't we? Or
it's been mentioned somewhere on a stream, and I popped a community post up as well, because people have probably noticed I've been knocking videos out left, right, and centre. Certainly the members' videos, obviously for the Saturday videos that we do. And the reason being is that I've got a newborn coming very soon.
Awesome.
And I need to get some time, obviously, to settle in with that and all the new routine with that. So I'm front loading the videos through so that while I step away for a little while, the content's still there and keeps moving. But I hope to be around. If they did say anything big broke, then I would probably find some time and jump on.
Put the baby down.
Baby in one hand, phone in the other, try to do a video on the quick.
Live streaming. Shenmue 4 announcement or something.
Yeah, it'd just our luck, wouldn't it? They do that just as I go dark for a while.
True, yeah. Day of birth while you're in hospital, imagine.
Yeah.
God. Yeah, but it does make sense with the content, like, that's such a good idea. I know someone did make a point the other day, because obviously new videos are accessible to members first, because that's obviously like the perk of the membership on YouTube. And someone was like, you know, there's so many videos now, it's like we're almost becoming like a pay-to-win service kind of thing. And it was like, no, actually, there's a little bit more to it than that. And none of the content is like locked or anything. It's going to eventually be accessible for everyone. Like, as is now, like a weekly video. That's never changed. It's just that because of upcoming circumstances, you've had to go mental.
I'm having to front load it, and I'm quite lucky that I'm off work at the moment. I'm between jobs, so I can sort of use that time effectively to get out the videos now, so that then there's no sort of gaps in the content. I can get where people come from with that. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, of course.
But it's a very unusual peak because of the way things are, and obviously the changes I'm about to embark on. So it's just to sort of cover the bases here, and then once things settle down, then the video content will probably calm down. There won't be so many members only videos initially. As you said, they always release weekly anyway. I think there's about 15 of them stacked at the moment.
Oh well. It's good content anyway, regardless. Other than that then, Matt, what have you been up to recently? You met up with Huber.
Yes.
Last week, was it? Time of recording?
Oh, yeah, it would have been a week and a half ago now at the time of recording. So, sort of a long story short there, he ended up in the UK. He was out previewing a game. I can't say what, it's all under embargo, but he was out in the UK previewing a game and popped a message on Twitter saying, is anybody about in the London area? He's around for a few days.
This is Michael Huber, by the way, if anyone's not familiar with just using the word Huber. Obviously, Easy Allies fame.
Yeah, Easy Allies, Game Trailers fame, Shenmue 3 reveal fame. All of the above. So I dropped him a message to say, look, I'm around, because my old work office was about a 45-minute drive from sort of the outskirts of London. Then you can jump on a tube and sort of be in central London from 20 minutes from there. So I said, I'm around, like, what's going on? Sorted out a venue and met up with him. And then some other Easy Allies people came out, like I guess some people who will obviously follow the show as well came out a bit later afterwards. I spent a good amount of time with him. Chatted Shenmue. The first thing he asked me was, where's Shenmue 4? I did laugh. I mean, in fairness, even if I did know where it was, I couldn't say anything anyway. But Yeah, we had a good chat. Talked Shenmue, talked Like a Dragon. I showed him some of the artwork renders that we've released because he hadn't actually seen them yet. He did say that he follows the community as much as he can, but he's a very busy man with all the content and stuff Easy Allies putting out, so he doesn't have the time to sit down and really delve into it. But his mind was blown by the amount of stuff that we've revealed, like the karate tournament location, the tournament referee, some of the things that obviously popped up in the anime, those sorts of things. Yang Lang's character model from the Dreamcast, just as some examples. And I talked him through sort of how we got hold of everything and all the rest of it. And he shook my hand and said, "I'm so glad you boys have got it, because it means it's going to be out there for everybody." So that was nice. And he's a great bloke, Kuba. I've got ton of time for him. He's really friendly, really approachable, makes a real effort with everybody. He's a legend, not just the Shenmue community, but in terms of gaming, I've got a lot of time for him and sort of how he comes across and everything else. I hope that, because I should, and we're both hoping to go to Gamescom this year, that maybe we can sort of bump into Huber again out there. That was the idea. I did say to him we'd try and get something arranged, so that'd be cool as well.
That would be awesome, because like I've not met him personally. You've met him last Gamescom as well, so
yes,
yeah, it'd be really cool to connect. And avid listener of the Easy Allies podcast and a lot of the videos and stuff and the content I've been listening to ever since they were formed, to be honest. That Shenmue 3 reveal trailer sort of introduced me to him, and then Peter Campbell was like, he's been watching the game trailers do the Shenmue 2 playthrough, or really enjoyed that, great recommendations, and then just followed them ever since, really. So yeah, it sounds awesome, man.
Yeah, and like I say, great dude, a lot of time for him, and he's definitely a treasure to the Shenmue community for without a doubt. And he came on the interview series about 3-4 years ago.
Of course did, yeah.
So if you haven't caught that one, catch that interview. It's obviously old now, but Huber, yeah,
in the backlog.
It's in the backlog. But he came across really well in that. It was like two mates just chatting all about Shenmue for 2 hours.
That was a fun episode. Definitely go back and check that out, guys, if you haven't already. Game-wise, Matt, you been playing anything recently?
So I've dived in. I finished Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza. I finished that yesterday. So
wow, nice.
That I put in about 25 hours into that, which I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's more of the same in terms.
So is it more of
Yakuza.
like a shorter Yakuza, sort of like the
a bit like the Mana
one.
Mana erased his name, a bit like that.
Awesome. Okay.
If you want to sort of blitz the story, you can do it fairly swiftly. I got involved in all the pirate stuff, sort of downing ships and all the rest of it. The gunplay that's pretty cool.
Sort of, yeah, that put me off a little bit, just because I hated the ship stuff in the Assassin's Creed games. Is it like that, or is it better than that, would you say?
It's simplified, but it's fun, in my opinion. And some of the ship battles, especially when you are stronger and your boat's stronger, you can wipe them out in seconds anyway. Okay. And you get the proper big fights in what they call the Pirates Coliseum. So you get some really big fights, so you can earn a lot of money doing that. But yeah, thoroughly enjoyed it. It's more of the same with Yakuza, Like a Dragon. Obviously, Sega are now investing a lot of money in that studio, along with Persona and Sonic. So I'd expect the scope of those games to expand quite greatly. Other games, I've started playing Alien Rogue Incursion on VR, my MetaQuest. That's good fun.
Yeah. I think that's on PSVR 2 as well.
Yeah, it came out on PSVR 2 first, and then came out on Quest about 3-4 months afterwards, I want to say. That's cool. Probably about an hour and a half into that. I've already had an alien jump out of me, and I've almost shat myself.
Shit you up, yeah,
it does.
It's so much different in VR, isn't it? These things,
brilliant.
You can't. It's hard to. Well, you can describe it, but I mean, it's hard to portray that to someone unless they see it with their own eyes in a headset.
Yeah,
like some of the feelings that your body sort of produces when you can feel like how close something is to you, if that makes sense.
Some of it's quite like I say, it's very jumpy and it's good, it's cool, and I've got a lot of time for VR, and I haven't got the biggest space to play it in, but it's still really good. So
sometimes you don't really need a big space, do you? You find that it works quite well in a sort of self-contained sit-down position. I play a lot of my VR games just sat down, really, like I would do if I was playing on a TV almost. It's just you need a little bit more space for moving your arms, and other than that's not obviously the case for every game, but for a lot of games you can just sort of play in sit-down mode and You know, if you put off by VR because you're in a small place, there's small place type of games that you can get. So I don't know if the Alien one is, Matt, but you recommend it?
Yeah, I would thoroughly recommend it. I'd recommend VR, to be honest.
Yeah, well, me too, man. I've been a bit of an advocate for it forever, really. It's nice that people are starting to sort of get into it. Like yourself.
Yeah, and it's I think VR gets a bit of hate from some angles for some unknown reason. I'd always say give it a chance. It's not for everyone, absolutely, and sometimes the equipment can be a bit of a barrier if you haven't got space, or they can be quite pricey. Although the PSVR 2's just come down in price as well. I'd recommend trying it, if even just once, and see what you think of it, because you might be pleasantly surprised by VR. But anyway, what games have you been playing and kicking around on?
Well, I've been doing a bit of everything really, because last time I was just in the sort of the latter stages of finishing up Tomb Raider 1.
Oh yes.
So I started and finished that Unfinished Business expansion pack, which is I think it's 3 extra stages. But in the remaster, they've actually reordered them differently.
Oh.
So yeah, bizarre. But I was reading up about them, and apparently the first stage that they start you with is the hardest, which I was like, oh my god, this is insanely hard. But it's because it's supposed to be the last of the 3 stages. It's just, I think they swapped them around for more like a continuity thing. So at the end of Tomb Raider 1, you're sort of sliding down this big pyramid, inside this big pyramid. And at the start of the last level, it's from that sliding down the big pyramid thing. So it actually works better in that order. It just happens to be the hardest level of the 3. So once you get past that level, the other 2 are actually a cakewalk, really. So really enjoyable. I never played the Unfinished Business, so that was quite interesting to sort of go back. You sort of go back to previous stages, but there's a bit of a different take on them. And I haven't actually started Tomb Raider 2 yet, but I do plan to. Started RoboCop a little bit, put a little bit more time into Yakuza 7, the Like a Dragon game. Not too much in either of them, really, because basically I kind of got back. Well, I discovered 2 addictive games, or for one of them I sort of rediscovered it. So I've been playing a little bit of World of Warcraft again, which I didn't ever expect to play it again, because going back towards the end of my college years, I got into World of Warcraft, and I took a year out after college and literally just played World of Warcraft all day, every day. It was the meme, South Park meme, just a guy in a basement just eating crisps and playing WoW. That was me for a whole year. But I don't know what made me fancy trying it again. I just sort of had a bit of a nostalgic sort of thing going on. So I googled World of Warcraft free private servers, and there's a really good one called Turtle WoW, and essentially it's as vanilla as you can get, really, in terms of when it was first released. You can't even press C to swim downwards. You have to point the camera down and look down. So it's very, very all the way back to the OG patch.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean, the original version. So really great actually to sort of go back to that sort of era of my, don't want to say childhood, because I was sort of a late teen at the time when I was playing it, but really good. Like I say, quite addictive again. Spent a few nights playing that. And then the other game I discovered was, I was actually around Paddy's, and I said to him, let's try that Balatro out, because I've heard so much good stuff about Balatro, and Paddy is a big poker player, always he's really into his poker.
Oh yeah.
So I was it's supposed to be a poker-esque type of game. Let's give it a go. And we kind of got into it. We were at first it seemed rather confusing, because there's a lot going on at first, but as long as you know poker hands, the rest of the game hasn't really got anything to do with poker. So essentially there's a scoring system, and you hit these shops in between stages. So say the first stage you've got to get 300 points.
Yeah.
So you play hands with the poker hands, and the each hand is worth a certain amount of points, and then the value of the card as well. So say if you played a 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, that would be a straight. And then you'd get 11 points for the ace, 2 points, 3 points, 4 points, 5 points, and it adds it all up. And essentially, if you get to 300, you clear the stage. And then there's a shop stage, a mid in between the stages, a shop where you buy jokers, cards, things that level up your hands and this sort of stuff. And that's the roguelike aspect of it. So you play a stage, this shop, you buy stuff, you earn money, and then you take it into the next stage where it's harder to clear that stage, but you've got more sort of firepower in terms of like these jokers are sort of doing different things, different mechanics. So like you might get a joker that's like every time you play a heart card, it gives you something, and then every time you play an odd card, it gives you something. So like it just gets you thinking a little bit, but it's very much like a sit down and casual just sort of play. I've been playing it on Apple Arcade on my phone, and it's just allowed me to just sort of play and chill out in the lounge with the family and not really focus too much on it, because you just put it down whenever you want. It's it's not like it's an active game or it requires all your focus like a console game, for example. It's been good in that sort of way. So I've been addicted to that, and I know that anyone that's ever played Balatro and got it, if you know what I mean, like felt the same way, I bet, because there's a lot of people that have been addicted to Balatro, and that's the reason why it's won that Game Award back in the day.
Yeah, it's one of those games that you look at a WiseNet or somebody who are making mobile games, which will come on to in a little bit, obviously.
True. Yeah.
They make something like that sticks as an addictive. That is a cash cow for years.
It is, man, because they've done really well, actually, because I guess it was like a paid game when it first came out. And I actually watched a video on YouTube about the developer. It's just a one-man guy, and he only expected like his friends to download it. He was just sort of making it for himself. And anyone that might like it, and he was expecting like 5 or 6 people to pick it up and thingy, but it's sort of spread because of how good it is and how addictive it is. It's sort of like word of mouth. You play this, that's and everyone got into it at some point, and then obviously it's just sort of blown up, and so much so that now there's an Xbox Game Pass version, and they're also like making special cards for that version with like Halo characters, Fallout characters. So this one guy probably making a game in his bedroom has now got all this brand recognition from these huge companies like Microsoft and whatnot, and the game's just sort of steamrolling into something huge, and obviously it's going to get updated, and they're probably going to add more modes, and if he can add more Joker cards, that instantly changes the way that everyone plays the game. And I've been watching some YouTubers, and some of them are so crazy at this already. Like I'm just sat there like making like flush hands, and like some of these people are like doing some insane stuff. It's just once you get into it, you do really get into it. Again,
Sounds
a game I'd recommend. Just a simple pick up and play game, and once you understand it, hours of fun.
Good stuff.
So let's get into today's show anyway. So we're sort of making this as almost like a catch-up type of show, along with a main discussion. And the main discussion might go on for a typical length of time. It's just that there's been 2 months since the previous episode, and obviously we want to fill in the gaps for a lot of people. Because you may have noticed it's essentially mid-March now, and we're only just doing like the second episode. So we may up ending like sort of having a shorter season this time around, just depending on how much time we both get. And obviously Matt especially is going to be crazy in a few months' time. So we do try and get like 8 episodes spread out the year. But like I say, it could be the 1 year where we sort of are not able to.
Although I will say that we had the one mainline show, we've had a bonus show for those renders, haven't we?
Exactly.
So technically we've done 2 already. We're in March. I'm going to use that.
I don't know who came up with the bonus show thing, because
I don't know.
It's sort of is like an episode, but we just sort of called it a bonus show. So
I think it's partly, isn't it? We do it like because it's almost like a video. Because
it's a video version,
It's slightly different format, I guess. So we just call it a bonus show.
Yeah, and then we did sort of do the tier list thing as well, which is potentially considered a bonus show as well.
Yeah, that was good fun, actually.
Yeah, I've not actually released that yet, but I will do. Probably after this one. We'll give it a few weeks or something, and then I'll release that as a bonus show as well. So we're going to delve into some of the recent Shenmue news that most of you probably heard by now, but if you don't follow our YouTube content or live streams, we're going to try and get you back up to date right now. So I'm going to start with the auction renders, Matt. So firstly, so we did kind of mention this in the previous episode. I'm sure we have, and at least if you've seen the bonus show, then you'll know what I'm on about here. But essentially, me, Matt, David DeVille from Shenmue Master, Chow, and Nathan24 all went in on these booklets full of Japanese artwork. We've spoken about this quite a lot now. I'm sure you know what we're on about. But this news point I'm going to make first is what led to us finding a portfolio online on a public website for a 3D designer developer worked on the original 2 Shenmue games and the Saturn build, etc., called Hideki Kawabata map.
Yeah, I mean this is insane, isn't it? So we won this auction, as you said, and went down this rabbit hole of Hideki Kawabata. Now this was through Sega Retro, if my memory serves me correctly. They'd linked his personal portfolio site, which you think is probably harmless in itself. But I say harmless, but what was there had been sat there, I'm guessing, for 20 odd years, were unseen renders from the development of Shenmue through the Virtual Fighter RPG era, through into sort of Dreamcast models of like characters from Shenmue 3, like Yang Lang, Alda, renders of the old karate stadium, the karate tournament. It was like a holy shit moment. Like, where's all this come from? And it was out in public, and we'd never have ever known about any of this had we not seen those auctions we obviously won in January. So it's all sort of lined itself up, hasn't it? It's like been a domino effect. We've found these and then gone bam, bam, bam. And it's, in the end, I think with the auction renders as well, I think we were releasing, 500 images of completely unseen Shenmue renders, which is mental.
Easily. And that's not even mentioning the new character map from those renders.
No, you say there was a sort of set the scene a little bit. Obviously, we know Ren has a Mongolian heritage. It's written down in the Shenmue 1 and 2 Japanese website. Yu Suzuki seemed quite surprised that you pitched that question to him.
Yeah, he did actually, didn't he?
in Japan at the time, so maybe he didn't know about that being out in the public. I don't know, but there we are. So one of the characters we found in there is pictured with Ren. So you've got like a picture of Ren, you've got this new character dressed in green with a hat, and you've got like stars everywhere, the moon, and you've got like tears coming out of her eyes, but they look like they're in like almost like a big dipperish type shape, don't they, in terms of
some sort of star formation.
Yeah. So further digging into like that and some other character renders of her, we discovered that her name is Mao, but she's also dressed in like Mongolian clothing. So I think we're pretty certain that she's going to be linked to Ren, assuming she's in a new Shenmue game, of course, and plans haven't changed, that she is going to have a lot to play with Ren. She could be a relative, a love interest for him. We just don't know, but they are intrinsically linked. And that was like one of the biggest discoveries of these artworks. It was like, wow, this is a character that we thought we hadn't seen before, but it turns out, I think David popped a little image of an old Dreamcast magazine from years gone by where you can just about make her figure out in some of the artworks like that they put on a table or something. But barring that, which, let's be honest, most people wouldn't have noticed that. This is a brand new character. We know nothing about her, but yet we know everything about her. And
it's weird, isn't it?
It's insane that she's been planned from the renders, at least, from probably since 1996. So again, what the scope of this thing just never ceases to amaze at all. It's mad.
It is mad, and like, come on to it a little bit now, but Shenmusings actually did a blog post detailing or going into more detail in these character renders and artworks and stuff, and he actually noticed there's a little boy, and I forget his name offhand, but obviously it was translated a little bit by Switch, and pinpointed actually one of the maps inside the orange Shenmue Premiere art book from like 1998. There's like zoomed in maps of, concept maps, and one of them is actually of Shuzo. And Switch, I believe, noted that one of the houses that they've marked down on this map in Shuzo is this little boy's house. So how crazy is that? So we're actually seeing the original plan there, that this location in Shuzo, which is actually the next location that we're heading to if and when we get a Shenmue 4, we could potentially be seeing remnants of these character artworks, like this little boy, what his role is. Just seeing them offhand without this prior knowledge now, we'd just assumed, that's just an early design for Wong, for example, or Mao.
We did do
originally, yeah. Same with Mao. We probably would have thought, it's just an early design concept art for Shenhua, not realising it's actually a standalone character. Both of these are with the little boy as well. So just amazing discoveries that hopefully everyone is lapping up and actually get. I think, even though there's some elements of spoilers when you think about it. Like, obviously, no one knew who this Mao was previously, and now everyone knows who Mao is. But at the same time, I feel like it's generating that excitement to Shenmue 4. I think there was a little bit of a bittersweet with Shenmue 3 and in terms of its story, and perhaps a lot of people have sort of dwindled from that original scope of the story, not really realizing like is what we'd play now just filler almost, whereas actually there is intrinsic links to original story outlines. That very much so, just seeing those original Dreamcast renders of Aldier and Yanlang, perfect, spot on. The concept art from the auctions that we've got Niao-sun in the original dress that is in Shenmue 3. So they haven't changed anything. These are the original plans. So it does add a little bit of promise again to where the story could then lead us. If we're going to Shuzo next and we could end up meeting this boy, we could end up meeting Mao further down the line. Kenji Miyawaki was excited about a Ming Ming at one point. So these things in the future still to get excited about, and I think these artworks add a level of excitement to people again, because you can sort of, especially over time, it's been 5 years or whatever, people can sort of feel like, what's the point or whatever, but hopefully this sort of rekindles a little bit of passion. I think it definitely has done for me.
And it's just exciting, isn't it? Because you want, in these, I say dark times is probably the wrong word, but these down times where obviously we're waiting for the news from Inin and what they're going to do with Shenmue 3, this is the sort of thing that keeps community buzzing, keeps community talking. Just, I don't know. And it also begs the question, what the hell else is out there that we don't know about?
Very much so, yeah. Well, going off our folders of artwork then, Matt, what are the plans that we've got for the way that we're going to be releasing this stuff?
So what we've then gone and done is James and I met up and we scanned in all 400 documents, not one by one. Luckily, the scanner let you do bunches, otherwise I think we'd still be there.
True.
So we did all of that. Obviously then divided everything up between the 5 of us that were in that auction. What James is working on at the moment is like a proper website link for everything. So he's going to break some of the images down, talk about some of the key images, really sort of document this stuff in great detail. While James has been doing that, I've been through the images and just touched any of them up in terms of any of the artifacting you get from scanning. Because let's be honest, if you get them scanned by a company, it's very, very expensive. And you also can't guarantee it won't happen there either.
True.
So we've scanned them in. There's been some artifacting. So I've gone through each image with Photoshop. I think I did 113 of these in total.
Okay.
And I just sort of sorted the artifacting out, made sure it was as good as it could be with the skill set I have. I'm sure people do a better job than me, but it's there anyway. So they've all been touched up and are ready to go. And then the intention is, once all the web links are ready and everything's together, we're going to release every image, documented down, broken into sections potentially. And obviously James and I will do a series of shows about them as well, to really go into the depth and the nitty-gritty detail of it. But the biggest thing here is preservation. These are preserved forever. They'll be on our website, and we will also have a link download to the zip folder for everything that's been scanned in as well. So every Shenmue fan can download that to their heart's content and have them. And that's the whole point of this.
Yeah, preservation at its finest. Right, so we've covered that sort of. More on that soon, I would have thought. Anyway, if you're really interested in these artworks, watch the space. Yeah. So speaking of blog posts, we've got a couple of new ones from PhantomRiverstone.com, where you can actually catch volume 12 of the weekly AM2 translations that he's been working on, and this one actually features an interview about the character of Guizhang Chen, providing sort of an insight into how his character design came to be, and even some of like Guizhang's own personal hobbies, which is interesting. And then the latest post is a translation of an interview which was featured inside the Japanese Dreamcast magazine for October 1999, back in the day, chatting with Hazuki Ishigaki, who was the voice actress for Shenmue in the Japanese release of the first 2 games. What's particularly fun about this interview is that Ishigaki also sort of dressed up in full Shenmue cosplay, which is quite amusing, I suppose, seeing like a full-on Shenmue walking down the streets of Dobuita, where she was actually present for like photographs within this article. So definitely worth checking those out. Next up, Matt. So we have been proactively trying to get is it Shenmue 1 and 2 on Games GOG or whatever it's called?
Yeah.
Good Old Games, isn't it? Good Old Games.
Yeah, GOG. So basically, they've got this dream list they're running. So it's a voting system where you vote for games to go on GOG. Now, GOG doesn't have like any DRM attachment or anything like that. So when you download the game, if GOG went out of business tomorrow, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You can have the game forever. You don't need any of like Steam has DRM, Epic has DRM, and it's a bit of a controversial topic in gaming, as certainly PC gaming as things are at the moment. So they're going around asking, what games do you want to see on GOG? And they've had all sorts of games go on there, like the old Command & Conquer games, and like Theme Park and all those sorts of games as well. The idea is to preserve them, but make them available for everybody to buy without DRM. And Shenmue's got, I think, between the sort of three... Now, this is where it doesn't help a little bit. You've got a vote for Shenmue 1, a vote for Shenmue 1 and 2, and a vote for Shenmue 2, because Shenmue 3 is already on there.
Yeah.
Between those three, I think you're at about 14,000 votes, which is pretty high. There's games with less votes have made it on there following this like dream list. So it begs the question why Sega just won't bite the bullet and just put them on there. But if you haven't voted on it, it's Sega. But if you haven't voted on this list, we'll pop the link in the description below and go and vote, because every vote counts. We want to see Shenmue everywhere and widening that market as much as we can, especially on somewhere like GOG where you can download it and it's yours forever.
Yeah, and especially with an in-games version of Shenmue 3 that's coming soon, it might bring an influx of fans that want to download and enjoy Shenmue 1 and 2 as well. And the GOG fanatics, you'd hope that they'd be able to download them and play them to the heart's content from that service as well.
Yeah,
I don't see why not.
No, I don't. It's just I say it's a good way, and I will say it was Tad on our Discord who first brought this to my attention. Actually, I will say that. I don't want to forget that.
Yeah, for sure, man. Speaking of voting, you can also vote for Shenmue in the upcoming BAFTAs, Matt, which I would highly recommend you do. So you can vote for any video game essentially, but we are obviously suggesting you vote for Shenmue.
So what they are going and doing BAFTA is they've put out it's an open vote, as you said, James, where they are looking for the most influential video game of all time. Now, we know that Shenmue carried a massive influence as to what AAA games do these days, what they don't do, and all the rest of it. Lots of AAA games learned from Shenmue, have been influenced by Shenmue in some way, shape or form. So it deserves to be absolutely in that conversation. So what you need to do is go on the website link that's in the description below. You fill in a very short form, just your name, I think an email address, and then it asks you for the game. So I'm saying to everybody, just put Shenmue in. Don't put Shenmue 1 or Shenmue 2. Just Shenmue, because I think that's the easiest way to recognise the franchise. Then it asks you for a little blurb as to why you feel that Shenmue is the most influential video game of all time. Now, I'm not saying it's necessarily going to win, because there's lots of video games that could be in that conversation. Like Mario 64 is the first 3D platformer, despite these days how I think rough around the edges it is now. But you need games like that to pave the way forward. Virtua Fighter should be in that conversation as well, another Yu Suzuki game, being the first 3D fighter and all the rest of it. But Shenmue should be in that conversation. It really ought to be. And just because it doesn't necessarily win doesn't mean it won't get an honourable mention somewhere in the BAFTAs, which if it does, look at the exposure for that. And if it goes ahead and actually wins the fucking thing, can you imagine the exposure the Shenmue series is going to get off the back of that? That's amazing. Yeah, that'd be really good marketing for it.
That's recognition, like for Yu Suzuki, and he's going to be chuffed to bits with that, isn't he? Because obviously you got the Guinness World Records for the Kickstarter stuff that were, given to him. But if he gets given a BAFTA for Shenmue as well, that'd be insane, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
and we've got that power basically. If you get on there, vote. There's no reason why you shouldn't. If you've been putting it off, definitely get on there. It takes 2 minutes, guys. Seriously, it really does take 2 minutes, and you can actually vote as many times as you want. So get those botters going, guys.
Get those, and it closes on March the 20th. So make that note for everyone.
As you're listening to this, get on it, because you won't have much time at
Correct.
all. Next up, Matt, you can have a little chat about this as well. So just a new line of merchandise has sort of been announced as such. It's called Figgies. If you want to tell us a little bit about what these are and why Shenmue is linked to this, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, James, you were the one who told me about all of this, because I didn't have a bloody clue this was going on until you messaged me. But essentially, Figgies are a sister sort of franchise to First for Figures. So you will know First for Figures. They do all the sort of the video game statues, anime statues. They did the Rio and Landy limited edition ones, and also the standard edition ones. I can't remember way back when they did them. They're quite rare these days. So they set up this little thing called Figgies, and essentially what they are is magnetic. I'm going to say figures. They're not quite figures, are they? Like magnetic like small statues, about the size of a Pepsi can, aren't they?
Yeah.
And they are going through a lot of franchises, a lot of characters, because essentially they're quite cheap to make. They're due out, I think the first run's in May. I can't remember the exact date. And it's got like an accompanying app where you can check them all off. So you scan a QR code on the box of the Figgies you get. You can then check them off on your app. You go into like the Figgies world. You get points towards the purchases and the shipping. They're doing like franchises together. So in Sonic's case, for example, we're probably going to do like Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Super Sonic together as an example, something like that. The idea being that you buy them together, you then clamp down on the shipping costs as well. So Shenmue, you're probably asking where this has all come from. So in that live stream, which Alex was doing from First for Figures, somebody mentioned, what about Shenmue characters? And he just quite openly said that Rio, Ren, Shenhua, and Landy are going to be part of the first wave of these Figgies things. And I think, James, you dropped a message, I think, in the chat somewhere and somewhere else. I can't remember exactly where it was, but an image will be on the screen anyway. And you asked the same question. And Alex again confirmed, yes, that Shenmue is going to be in that first wave. Now, this is brilliant because it's more Shenmue merchandise. They're relatively cheap. I think it's $13 per figure, so it's about 10 quid a figure, which isn't too bad. Obviously you've got to factor in the shipping costs to that. They are going to be limited to 1,000 per figure, so 4 Shenmue characters, there'll be 1,000 of each of them, for example. And they're going to be really, really, really important in defining whether we get more Shenmue characters in this Figgies line, or potentially to get more First Figures Shenmue statues, because what Alex is saying is if he has data to support these franchises getting statues, they will do the statues. Now, if this Shenmue stuff sells out rapidly, and we're pushing this really, really hard, it needs to sell out rapidly, then there's every chance we'll get more Shenmue merchandise, gives us more recognition, maybe some statues, and then just puts that whole franchise in a better position. But they're really fun. I really like the idea behind it. I think it's great fun. And because they're so cheap, in comparison to their statues anyway, they're a lot lower risk, so they can take these chances on franchises like Shenmue and give us some merchandise. And on top of, obviously, the limited run game stuff we've got coming, the Shenmue 2 run they're going to be doing from limited run games as well. We're actually getting quite a lot of Shenmue merchandise this year, which is mental.
Yeah, that's true, because we're waiting for the Shenmue 1 line from limited run games that's due around July, I believe, last time I looked. And then, like you say, the Shenmue 2 line, and then we've got some Figgies stuff coming. It's great stuff for Shenmue fans to get on board with, because these look very, very interesting to me, like very collectible, like you say, very fun, colourful. They're like pixel artworks. There's also like a chase element to them as well, where there's a 10% chance to get an additional backing. So they all come with a metal plate that's going to be themed. I imagine Shenhua has like a Guilin themed background, Rio maybe like Japan background, or potentially even they could line up all 4 and there's like a big scene of all 4 of them perhaps. And they're also reversible, so the logo's on one side and the background's on the other. And then there's also a chance to get an additional metal plate, bronze, silver or gold. So bronze, I think you've got a 6% chance of getting, silver a 3% chance, and gold obviously a 1% chance, which is like 10 out of the 1,000 line could come with that additional gold plate back in. So yeah, it's cool in a way, because like you don't just get that, you get both of them. Alex was like suggesting like previously, if you bought like a Funko Pop off a website that has a chance to be a chase, and you got the chase version, you sort of stuck with the chase version, even if you just wanted the regular version. So this way around, you get the chase and the regular version kind of included, which is a neat way of doing it, actually. But yeah, really exciting for Shenmue fans. I'm personally looking forward to grabbing all 4 of those as and when they're released. And you can sign up to the Figgy website right now, and it's sort of like a cool little social media platform to hype up some of these releases, and you can even sort of suggest other lines for Alex to sort of cover, and like he says, he's not scared to try things with this new branding, so definitely get some suggestions over to him if you want to, maybe for some future Shenmue characters for a future Shenmue line perhaps.
Absolutely, yeah.
Next up, Matt, so this is the month of Steel Paws that's going to be releasing on Netflix Games. If you want to give us the details on this, obviously you can pre-register it for right now, but what is the actual release date, and sort of what can people expect from this game if they are looking forward to it?
Well, this is a funny one because the release date's been branded around as being the 25th of March, which is what Netflix Games pushed when they released the announcement trailer on the 4th of February, as it happens, when we were streaming. And then somewhere else said it was March 27th. So it's around those 2 dates. We'll keep an eye out as to when that solidifies. But it's available on Netflix Games. So if you've got a mobile phone, you've got Netflix, you can play it via your mobile device. It will work either with touchscreen controls, or it will work with a PlayStation controller on your phone, or you can get one of those backbone type controllers and hook the phone up or whatever you're using that way. It's very much like a tower... I say tower defense, well, not tower defense, more tower attack than anything else. By looking at it, you just basically run through levels, beating up robots, and then smashing your way through them as much as you possibly can. It's got a bit of a roguelike element to it as well. Some of the gameplay suggests a little bit of platforming in there as well. I love the art style in it, actually. I think the art style is really, really cool. I hope it comes to consoles. I don't know if it's got a year exclusivity or not. I mean, it's probably a space to watch in a year's time from now and see what happens there. But I'm quite excited to play it. I am intending that we can stream it. I've got most of what I need to do to set it up on my phone to stream, which will be interesting in itself. So that'll be a fun hour stream, just running around beating up robots. But again, another title from WiseNet should keep the doors open. And if it's successful, they might do more things as well. There's a relationship there with Netflix. Could they do something with Shenmue the anime as part of this? Who knows? But again, looks fun, looks cool, and it's all good for WiseNet, and it was revealed at the Game Awards, which is, gives it a lot of exposure as well. So let's see how it gets on. I'm excited to drill in and play it.
Yeah, definitely highly anticipated. I'm told there's Shenmue Easter eggs in there as well, potentially.
Yes.
So if you are looking forward to this release, guys, definitely get it pre-registered for your device. And like Matt says, the release date is the tail end of March this month, so keep an eye out. Whether it's going to release on the 25th or the 27th or whatever it is, definitely just keep tabs on it, and we'll also let you know, obviously, when it is actually out.
Absolutely.
Just before I forget, so the Figgies thing, I'll just give a shout out to Rhino, who told me about the live stream. That's where I originally heard of it. Just make sure we credit people.
Yeah,
of course. Finally, then, Matt, last bit of news. I just wanted to get some updates on the tweetathon stuff. So obviously we've just done 11th month of this hashtag Let's Get Shenmue 4 trending type of campaigning that we're doing, but where are we at with that? What's the future plans? And also, if you want to mention what's going on with the billboard thing as well.
Yeah, so I'll do the billboard first, actually, because a lot of people are probably interested in that, and then I'll come on to the tweetathon itself. So as everybody will be aware, December we had the whole billboard stunt lined up with Rio pointing at Sega and all the rest of it, and it was going to be like a real sort of PR type stunt. We did really well anyway on the tweetathon for December. That would really been the icing on the cake. As you would have seen from the video that we put out, it didn't happen. So I spent most of January chasing them, well, not arguing was probably the wrong word, but chasing the company to get a resolution to this. And they originally said, do you want another slot? We were like, I think the moment had gone. So I then chased a refund, which we have now got. So the money that everybody donated through the Shenmue World Issue 3 Kickstarter is currently sat in a bank account. It's not been touched. And we are going to look at what we do with it in terms of something notable for the Shenmue community and the hashtag Let's Get Shenmue 4 this coming year.
Is it gathering interest, Matt, or...
Well, the interest rate of about 0.3%. So I might be able to give everybody 30p in about 10 years or something. But
yeah.
It's sat there anyway. It's all safe and sound, and we're looking to do something with that. But obviously, we'll tweet out and announce what we're looking to do. If anybody's got any suggestions with that, please let us know. We're happy to obviously take those on board as well, because this is the community's money. It's not our money per se. So that brings us then on to the tweetathons themselves. March 4th, again, we trended again. That's the 11th month in a row now, which is fantastic. I think there's around 6,000 posts for the hashtag Let's Get Shenmue 4. Hashtag Shenmue trended on around 2,000 posts, so we had about 8,000 total there. The X algorithm's causing a bit of a problem in that it doesn't pull through for everybody. It pulls through really late. So we are thinking about, and I will have more details of this in a video, possibly by the time this podcast comes out, detailing what we intend to do about that and maximize the use of the X algorithm and see if we can make better headway with that. But again, the Shenmue community's come out brilliantly on X over there. 11 months in a row is absolutely insane. I want 12 months in a row, the year. That's a big landmark, and I want 10,000 posts on there. That's what, massive landmark. 10,000 posts, a year trending would be absolutely fantastic.
Give him what he wants.
Yeah, give me what I want, damn it. And for the last 2 months over on Blue Sky, we've also been doing the same thing. It trended on Blue Sky. Their trending algorithm doesn't work in the same way that X's does yet. In that it doesn't have like a top 30 or anything. So you have to use these accounts that scrape Blue Sky, because it's open source, for the top key phrases or hashtags. So hashtag Let's Get Shenmue 4 was in the top 100 for February the 4th. And then hashtag Let's Get Shenmue 4 was in the top 30 for March the 4th. So we've made some real progress over there as well. As I keep saying, if you've got accounts on both, please post on both, because we don't want to dilute the message on either. Likewise, I know the issues with X and everything at the moment. If you're not going to use X day to day, fine, carry on. I understand the reasons for that. But please post on X as well as Blue Sky, because it just means that message is getting out. It's a two-pronged attack thing as well. But I hope to go into April with another successful tweetathon, a year trending, and we'll see where we end up from there. And I'll get some more details out about what we intend to do for the April tweetathon, if I haven't done so by the time this show airs.
Smashing, yeah. Like a full year would be a real good statement. So let's keep it up, guys. See where it leads. And I suppose that is the Shenmue news section done. So hopefully everyone's caught up now. So if you weren't aware of all the bits and bobs that have been going on around the dojo or the wider Shenmue community, and even beyond that with these merch companies, etc., now you're up to date and we can crack on with today's show. So we're going to have a quick music break before we get into that main discussion topic. So here is the latest release from, well, let's just keep it a secret for now. That Wanga's got the money, he's just a little thief. Nozomi sells some flowers, but not her jewelry. Shuin can clear her brain by catching this red leaf. Shenmue, she cooks a bunny, put that in the relief. Want more and more, Landy just wants more and more. Phoenix Mirror is what he's looking for. Want more and more. Maybe in Shenmue 4, Dad of Shenmue says to walk along the wall. Freed from the fire, Landy must have survived. Freed from the fire, Landy must have survived. Freed from the fire, Landy must have survived. Freed from the fire. La 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 Landy. La 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 Landy. La 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 Landy. La 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 Landy. Zhongquan has got no money performing on the streets. Garoi knows the harbor and where to take a leak. Nielsen loves the flame, she's stolen the phoenix. That wanger's got no money, Jack Cola's his relief. Want more and more, and he just wants more and more. Phoenix Mirror is what he's looking for. Want more and more. Maybe in Shenmue 4, Dad of Shenmue says to walk along the wall. Freed from the fire, Landy must have survived. Freed from the fire, Landy must have survived. Freed from the fire, Landy must have survived. Freed from the fire. La 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 Landy. La 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 Landy. La 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 Landy. La 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 Landy. It seems you've improved a bit. Landy, fight me! I will avenge my father! You really have a death wish, don't you? Then allow me to reunite you with your father. La 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 Landy. La 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 Landy. La 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 Landy. La 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 Landy. La 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 Landy. La 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 Landy. La 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 Landy. La 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 la. Welcome back. That was a one-off. Now that's what I call Jim's Poetry Corner 2026 release with the song Freed from the Fire. Hope you all enjoyed that. Right then, Matt. So today I thought it would be fun to take a look at a more recent discussion article, again translated by Switch of PhantomRiverstone.com. The link to this will be in the show notes below if you're interested in following along with us. And this was an article from the tail end of November 2019, so just a little bit after Shenmue 3 had been released, and it's sort of actually is a nice sort of continuation from the theme of our previous show, where we were learning from Yu Suzuki himself what players could expect from the upcoming release of Shenmue 1 at the time, back in 1999. So now we're like 20 years later, and Esra Krabbe sits down with Yu Suzuki and other key members of the development team. We've got the animation producer Hiroaki Takeuchi and second director Keiji Okuyasu to talk about their memories working on Shenmue 20 years plus prior. This is a 3-part series of posts, and if we get the time, we'll try to get through the whole series today, so definitely strap in. Right then, Matt, so instantly, straight off the bat, looking at the picture here at the top of the post, we can already see some familiar-looking artworks.
Yeah, can't we just?
And folders. Not ones that we've actually got, but you can sort of see the same sort of styling and
like
the sort of the white page character artwork, a little bit of a name underneath, very much the same similar style,
same format, style, everything, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is scary and also quite reassuring that we haven't been sold a bunch of duds.
That is true. It authenticates the ones that we've already got. So I'll start us off. We're going to read paragraph per person here, so obviously between me and Matt. So we have got something on the early concept art here. So like I say, essentially this is a post Shenmue 3 interview discussion, but the devs are talking about all the way back 20 plus years ago, which is really interesting to sort of see their personal takes on what happened 20 years prior. If I don't know how they got the memories to do it, because I can't remember what happened 2 days ago, but obviously these Japanese developers store it better than I do in their heads. So, early concept art. Displayed on the table are folders containing some coloured concept sketches. And if you're watching the YouTube video, Matt will have pictures of these on the screen so you can sort of see what this article is. All like I say, these are a link in the show notes if you want to actually look at it whilst you're listening. Yu Suzuki comments that these were created during the development of the original Shenmue games, with some being from the start of the project, which began 4 to 5 years prior to the release of the first game in 1999. He says the figure wearing Chinese-style martial arts clothing is Akira from Virtua Fighter, as the idea at the time was to make him the main character in the story centered around Chinese martial arts. Indeed, Yu Suzuki wrote a set of scripts that encapsulated the story called The Legend of Akira. The illustrations at which the folder is open show him as a young boy of junior high school student age, and Yusan explains that this is because he was debating whether it was to be a game in which the protagonist grows older, for example, starting as young as 10 years old and growing older until he reaches 45, which is insane, really, to think. That was his original plan. Or one where he stays the same age, and these illustrations were for the growing older case, so he was first imagining him as a child, which we kind of see a little bit of in the flashbacks.
Yeah, we do, don't we?
Yeah.
So they've definitely made use of it. I think the initial idea of spanning 35 years across his life, I think, was probably a very, very ambitious one, to say the least. But they obviously got use of the young to older style, albeit the Chinese martial arts outfit I don't think was used in the way I think we all envisaged in Shenmue 3. It is there,
true,
but it obviously wasn't used in the way that maybe we all have hoped. But again, seeing these artworks and then seeing sort of the translation from these artworks to the game, that gi is in there, and it's part of the game. So again, while you can criticize Shenmue 3 for a lot of things, they have stayed true to the source material in the models and things that they have used, certainly from what we can see in front of us.
Do you think that's Shenmue on the other folder?
It's hard to say, isn't it? You'd think it, looking at her face.
Maybe we'll talk about it in a bit, I don't know.
But then it could just be a completely random character we haven't even bumped into yet, for all we know.
Yep.
So then we sort of come down to Keiji Okuyasu's first involvement. So Keiji was one of the very first team members for the first Shenmue, for which he was a game director. You told me to make Virtua Fighter RPG for the Saturn, he recollects. Now, that's a rabbit hole in itself, that one. The team size started off small, around 5 people, you confirmed, and at first it was an experimental process in the form of a prototype called The Old Man and the Peach Tree, which was revealed again at GDC 2014 in the process around that. As well as that, very early on, I remember experimenting with building systems, such as one for automatically creating mazes. He attributes the reason for you selecting him on the project being due to the extensive background in developing for the SEGA Saturn, most notably Virtua Fighter, together with experience in building RPG Rent a Hero, which was only released in Japan, helping to set himself apart from the other developers in AM2. AM2 consisted largely of people who wanted to make arcade games. The A of AM2 stands for amusement, after all, adds U. When asked whether perhaps the development group might not have been particularly interested in making a game like Shenmue, Yu agrees that back then, when arcade hardware was vastly superior to home consoles, developers felt a strange sense of pride, a situation which has changed nowadays, where hardware at home can equal or surpass that of an arcade game.
Very true.
It's interesting, though.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't realise the A was for amusement, I don't think.
I'm sure I've heard it somewhere.
What does the M stand for then?
No idea. Quick Google, I'll have a look probably.
Maybe. So the next section is Yu Suzuki and games of the time. He says, although I hardly play any games, when it comes to creating one, I do take a quick look at the competitors' games. I feel that I should. So Yu explains that he tried playing out a few of their most well-known parts, but he soon got tired of them and stopped playing. He felt dissatisfied at things like the way his character couldn't speak with others unless facing them directly, or why he couldn't walk diagonally. I don't play games myself, he says, so I always ended up comparing them to the real world, you see.
It's interesting, isn't it, when you think of that and
Yeah.
that, I guess, frustration. But back in those days, that was just the way games were, wasn't it? You had to be directly in front of them to talk to them. Obviously, Shenmue then pioneered that you didn't really need to do that. You could be next to them and the character would turn and face you to talk to you, which I know sounds really silly now, but like that's how you talk to someone in the real world. So having not played games much himself obviously serves a benefit there potentially, or possibly a hindrance in that it costs a lot of money to do those things, but it all added to that realism, didn't it, at the time?
Yeah, it just sort of helps him engage like where his vision is, I think, better, because if he's seen flaws in other games and no one's really thought of them or tried to tackle them as such, and he comes along and, you know, sort of reinvents the wheel by implementing them into his games. It's obviously beneficial because now that's kind of the norm, isn't it? When you're talking to people in video games these days, everyone turns to face the character, don't they? Or the character turns to face the person that they're talking to, because it's obviously more natural to speak to someone like that. So you, Suzuki, identifying that and then implementing it at a time where it was probably really difficult to implement something like that, especially alongside everything else that was going on in Shenmue, coding-wise. Again, let's get him a BAFTA.
Yeah, that's exactly why he needs a BAFTA. There we go. Then we move on. Hiroaki Takeuchi in the concept movie is the title here. So animation producer Hiroaki Takeuchi, who is also credited as game advisor for the first Shenmue, was also an early member of the original development team. Takeuchi recounts that animation producer Koji Morimoto was hired, and they worked together to create a concept film based on user descriptions. It was a prototype movie, said Takeuchi. I'd like to see what that movie was.
Yeah, so obviously not Shenmue the movie, it was something else that they worked on as a bit of a prototype as such, I guess.
Very interesting.
Which leads us to the Old Man and the Peach Tree that we've kind of heard quite a lot about over the years because of that GDC talk. But he says, Yu Suzuki showed me the Old Man and the Peach Tree, saying that he wanted to make something like that. I didn't have a clue what he meant, recalls Takeuchi, but I remember Yu-san had formed a very clear idea of his concept. The Old Man and the Peach Tree was the first experimental project, says Yu, tracing the kanji character for Peach in the air with his finger as he speaks. This prototype demonstrated the feasibility of features that would later be incorporated into Shenmue, such as characters you could speak to and who walked around based on a set schedule. There was also a quest you could carry out and a kind of battle. It looked like it could work technically, so I moved on to Virtua Fighter RPG.
Now, am I right in thinking that somebody, you may have asked him, I can't remember, but it was asked fairly recently, what would he like to do with the Old Man and the Peach Tree? Would he ever release it as a game in itself? And I think he said no, because it was basically a concept thing, and it wasn't meant for that purpose, if that makes sense. I'm sure somebody mentioned that a while back.
Maybe it was us. I can't quite remember. Like, it feels recent, but then it also, I don't know if we ever found space in our questioning to ask him about that.
I can't remember, man. I can't remember.
Or was it Switch maybe asked him about, like, what's he doing with prototypes? Would he ever finish it? Or was it in the documentary, actually?
It was somewhere recent, wasn't it? I remember seeing it. I just can't quite remember.
He said like one day, maybe, I think. But obviously, prototype sort of stays as a prototype. Oh, was it like the question was, would he ever consider finishing it off? Maybe that was in that GDC talk, actually. One of the Q&A at the end of the GDC.
May well have been.
Some dude stood up and said, "The Old Man and the Peach Tree, will it ever get finished or something?" And he said, like, maybe one day, but obviously it was a prototype or something like that. I'm sure he said something like that.
I'm sure he said something like that. But yeah, I will find it anyway, because that was quite an interesting... it just stood out in my head.
Yeah, rejig my memory a little bit there, yeah.
For some reason. So then we move on to conveying the concept. And it comes on to say that Yu relates that after the decision had been made to start the project proper, he found that members of the project team weren't able to grasp what he was trying to do. The industry didn't have directors or people experienced with motion capture. It was a new concept. Games didn't have things like voiced lines or acting. So to implement it, I gathered people from various different industries, a movie person, a scriptwriter, a novelist, and so on. However, this resulted in a communication problem as all the experts used different industry-specific terminology and specialist language. They couldn't understand what I was trying to say at all. There you go. When you're doing something for the first time, you can see where that comes from.
Yeah.
In order to make it easier to understand for everyone in the team, you wrote the story in the form of a novel, with the classic 4-part narrative structure of introduction, development, twist, and conclusion. In addition, he expressed it musically, composing a 4-movement symphony. I asked myself what would be a form that everyone would understand in common, and that was music and story. Okuyasu confesses he can't recall these, however, Takeuchi on the other hand does. I remember my first impression was how grand it was, a human drama, is what he said.
Very good, very good. It is interesting gathering people from those different fields. It makes you wonder, like, because I feel like one of them was Steven Spielberg, potentially. And it was like how to get all these people in a room at the same time. And it reminds me of, I don't know if anyone's seen it, but there was a documentary on, I think it was Netflix, for We Are the World, which is like a song that was for charity back in the day with like, Michael Jackson, Bob Dylan. There was like loads of people involved in this. Cindy Looper, whatever her name is, Cyndi Lauper, and they all sort of banded together. And Quincy Jones was like the guy that orchestrated all these artists to get together. There must have been like 20 to 30 of these artists, and he put a sign above the door as they walked in that said, "Leave your ego somewhere else. Leave your ego at the door," or something like that. Because obviously, it's that kind of thing where you're getting these industry professionals that all come from different walks of life, and they all think that they're probably the best, the top of their sort of thing. And it's quite interesting, I think. Like, I would have liked to have been in this room with all four of these, these movie people, these script writers, these novelists or whatever, Suzuki got all together, musicians and whatnot, and just sort of see how that conversation panned out, because it would have been interesting to say the least, I would have thought.
Yeah, it would have been for sure.
That moves us on to a different approach. In terms of what separated Shenmue from other games at the time, Okuyasu comments jokingly that game players of the time took for granted certain limitations in games. You didn't share that same understanding. The statement causes the group to chuckle. I couldn't help thinking that instead of spending so much development time on implementing those small details, wouldn't it be more fun to include an extra quest? You had a different way of seeing things.
See, that's interesting there, and I'm going to make the point. Back in the day, they obviously went for detail and not extra quests. Now, because I think a lot of games follow a template, they just bloat things out with extra quests. And actually, some of the detail in video games has been lost.
Yeah.
So it's a balance, isn't it, to get content in terms of things to do, but also the actual real-world interactivity and detail in that world to make it feel like an escape, which Shenmue obviously did very, very well on that latter part.
He said something very similar, was it in the previous episode, but about the space of an environment. Like,
yes,
it doesn't matter how big the space is, as long as what you do within that space is fun.
Yes, and you're enjoying it.
Exactly.
So that's quite cool. And then we go on to Shenmue on the Saturn. Now, this is always a interesting topic. So the question's posed directly: how far did development progress on the Saturn? And it performed really well for a Saturn, Yu says. For a Saturn, the quality was impressive, although in terms of content, it was really just the first part Okuyasu adds, indicating with his hand. We'd argue differently, but maybe that's before the games were split. But there we are. Yu thinks otherwise with respect to this last statement. Well, not just the first part. I had a look the other day, and it went a pretty long way. It went as far as Guilin after all, so they obviously sort of misremembering things potentially.
Yeah.
Although significant work had been put into the Saturn version, the decision was made to remake it for the new Dreamcast console. That was tough, reflects Okuyasu. He explains that, in fact, this would be its second remake. The team had already made it once in order to run on a Saturn that had been especially expanded with an acceleration board. Then, a while after that, we were told that a new console would be coming out, so to move to that. We were like, "Are you serious?" And he said with a rueful chuckle.
God, that must have been awful.
I know. Now, I had Pandemodium on, who does all the Saturn reviews of all the US releases to Sega Saturn games. He reviews every game. He's part of the Saturn Shiro media group as well, and all the rest of it. So he's quite well known in the Sega Saturn community and circles. And I asked him directly about the Sega Saturn build, because I had him on the show to talk about that. It's very much his area of expertise, far beyond mine. And his take on the footage that was released with the Xbox version back in the day, and obviously on the Dreamcast version back in the day when you complete the game, that was running on a base Saturn. It wasn't an enhanced Saturn, that was running on a base Sega Saturn. And his understanding from talking to people at the time was it wasn't on an accelerated Saturn board for very long before they moved it to Dreamcast.
Right.
So that might tie in a little bit to what they're saying there.
Yeah, interesting into it. And it is interesting to think that Yu Suzuki said he looked at it. I don't know if he just watched that video, like we've all seen the same Sega Saturn footage, and he's seen that it went all the way to Guilin, but it does sound like somewhere at some point a full game, almost like from the start to the end of Guilin potentially here, was working and playable. It wasn't like it was a beta build, or well, I guess it was technically a beta, but I mean it wasn't like a broken game as such. It was like sounding like they got quite a long way which is why they were so annoyed that they had to then potentially remake it for the Dreamcast. So the amount of work that they put into it, and we can see that in some of the concept arts with like the character models that we've got, the karate tournament, etc. So it was more than just what we got from the original 2 games, or probably less than what we got in terms of like the amount of content, but in terms of where the game started and finished, they in fact did more on the Sega Saturn, in the sense because we got the karate tournament, the prequel to Before a Wild Eyes, sort of what we'd seen in the anime, I guess. And went as far as Guilin and potentially Bailey Village if there's models of Aldier.
Yeah. Wow, this is the scary thing, isn't it? That there were Dreamcast models of Aldier, so were there Saturn models of Aldier?
Mm-hmm.
We don't know, do we? There might be some for all we know.
Makes sense to me.
It would make a lot of sense, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so Magic Systems. To save data space, several auto-generation systems were developed: Magic Weather, Magic Rooms, Magic Maze, which required very little data, and you points out that it was thanks to these new systems that each game was able to fit on just a few discs. So yeah, we did sort of cover that Magic stuff in some of the previous episodes, if you want to go back and listen to some of those interviews and whatnot.
Talked about that at length, doesn't he, in the previous interviews from back in the day. So that, insane for the time. I'll leave it there otherwise. Then we come on to the scope of Shenmue 1. It says the question posed here is, how did you always plan for Shenmue 1 to cover only the part of the story set in Yokosuka? And he says, when I turned it into a game, I didn't expect it to have so much content, says Yu. He explains that various team leads would come up with various good ideas, for example, mixing in free gameplay rather than a long sequence of cutscenes. As a result, the amount of gameplay increased rapidly to such an extent it would no longer fit, and so in the end it became Shenmue 1. What I'd originally planned back at the beginning for the Saturn was to have just a Volume 1 and a Volume 2, and that would be it. And look how that changed.
Wow. Okay.
Wow. Seeing that, and I'm thinking Volume 1 and 2 would have been very nice looking back on where we are currently, but beggars can't be choosers, I guess. Okayasu confirms that Shenmue development was carried out simultaneously on several sections, working on the series as a whole rather than one game at a time, which would tie into the artwork stuff that we've got.
Yeah, and mad that he's saying working on the series as a whole. So, again, scary. It could have gone past Guilin. But then just being coy about it, I don't know.
I'm picking up a point here in terms of how RGG studios work at Sega now, right?
Yeah.
So they reuse a lot of assets, and I understand that, and they bring costs down that way. But they work on several games across that series at a time. So it's very much a principle here. I know Shenmue's its own like big overarching story, but it's the same principle. The same principle here. They are working on the series as a whole rather than one game at a time. It's the same concept that RGG are doing now that they did back in AM2 with Shenmue back in those days. So again, in terms of the way Sega are working, how influential is Shenmue there to what they're doing now?
Oh, for sure. I mean, it wouldn't even exist without Shenmue, would it?
Well, no, quite. But then you look at the working practices now that they're doing there, and Sega are doing that now, and it's carried through for years and years, and it just begs belief in my mind that Sega don't want to recognise Shenmue because of the finances behind it. And I could understand the issues around the success of it or not, but you can't deny the impact it's had in terms of the Like a Dragon series, the way RGG looked to be working. If you don't have this back then, do you have it? Do you have those working practices at Sega now? Does it come in later? Do they have the success they have had with the RGG series? So I guess what I'm arguing is that Shenmue's sort of failure has been paid for repeatedly.
I was just thinking the same. I mean, that's a really good point. You think Sega lost all this money, in a sense, by creating the most expensive video game of all time, hoping to sell millions and millions of Dreamcasts or whatever the original plans were behind lumping so much money into Shenmue, and then sort of regretting that decision from then forth, and sort of Shenmue's had this sort of connotation of making Sega go bump almost because of how much money they spent on it. But then, like you've just said, Yakuza wouldn't exist without it, and now Yakuza's basically their cash cow. So, in a sense, it's come around full circle, and all the money that they invested back in the day, Yakuza are using those concepts and just the fact of what Shenmue did to the gaming industry, like the game industry as a whole, and how it allowed a Yakuza game to even exist in the first place is, making crazy amounts of money these days. So it's definitely paid for where we are today.
Oh, absolutely, and it's not a slur on the Yakuza series or any other games that Sega have made using these methods. But my point being is actually, while people and Sega may view Shenmue as a failure in terms of the commercial success at the time, the lessons that they've learned and the practices they learned back then are being implemented now, and they're reaping the rewards of that.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, I think they need to give it a bit more fucking respect. But
and Yu Suzuki, every Yakuza fan or player today, everything they're enjoying is all thanks to Yu Suzuki.
It doesn't happen without him. Yeah. You can argue that they've taken the model and done their own thing with it, some for better, some for worse, and it's wider AAA gaming as well. Yeah. And I know people don't like the whole term Shenmue walk so others can run, but it is very much true. And Shenmue does have to learn lessons going forward in terms of a Shenmue 4, how you modernise it and keep the spirit of the original games, but modernise it so it's more accessible for people and the rest of it. But you can't deny that Shenmue had positive influences across the industry, maybe also some negative influences in that it maybe showed some people what not to do in some aspects, potentially.
Yeah.
But it's had influence. And the fact that it's had influence on working practice here, like I said, I think it's the money Sega have made implementing these practices is more than paid for Shenmue, and they need to look at that again. But I'll stop ranting now because it will turn into a Matt rant, and we don't want that in the middle of a podcast.
We don't.
That's for streams only. But to finish up, it says, we worked on Shenmue 2 at the same time as Shenmue 1, he nods. At first, we didn't intend to finish the first game at Yokosuka. We had been prepared to go through to Guilin Adzu, but it kept growing and growing. And that is the end of the first part of the discussion.
Great stuff. So I actually pulled out a second little blog post just to sort of tack on the end of this because I thought it was quite interesting. So obviously they're talking about what the original intentions were for creating Shenmue and the time they were creating the whole series as a whole here, which would have included all 11 chapters, or would it? So there's another blog post here. I've got a very short post here. So Switch has sort of pulled this from a few different sources essentially to sort of see what Yu Suzuki's take is on the old chapter structure from year to year. So it turns out the concept of Shenmue being released in chapters was formally announced by Sega at the 1999 Tokyo Game Show, which was held from the 18th to the 21st of March. An announcement was also made at the event regarding a revision to the release timeframe to the 5th of August 1999, which was previously spring, although the final release date would obviously end up as the 29th of December. So let's have a look at a couple of reports in Japan at the time. So Japanese website ASCII reported about it on March the 19th, 1999 as follows. So Sega Enterprises announces Shenmue Chapter 1 Yokosuka, the epic work produced by Yu Suzuki. It was announced today that the title known until now as Shenmue has changed to Shenmue Chapter 1 Yokosuka. Due to the vastness of the story, it has been split into chapters, with plans for sequels Chapter 2 and Chapter 3 at a later date. In addition, the release date was announced being August the 5th. Website PC Watch, on the other hand, included this snippet in their report from TGS99 where they expressed some disappointment at the change in the release date. So regarding Sega's Shenmue, which has drawn attention as the killer title, the release date that was announced is not spring but summer on August the 5th. Furthermore, it won't be possible to play it in its entirety, but only Chapter 1. This is somewhat unfortunate outcome, but the next generation PlayStation not having been announced, this game seems to have taken centre stage, an outcome that might be fortunate for Sega. So as we've seen, the chapter-based release approach was announced to the public by Sega for the first time on the 19th of March at TGS. So the, I don't know if you say ASCII, is it ASCII?
ASCII, yeah.
The ASCII news report above refers to further plans for releases of Chapter 2 and 3, indicating a one chapter per game approach, which was planned at the stage. In addition, according to the Sega fan site at the time, Sega also stated at TGS99 that the total number of chapters planned for Shenmue would be 16. But in later years, and a recent example being in the Game Watch interview at Gamescom 2017, Yu Suzuki actually gives the total number of chapters as 11. The exact number and arrangement of chapters making up the Shenmue story has remained a point of discussion throughout the years amongst fans. So, yeah, interesting. It's sort of confirmed there what the guys are saying there, that back in the day they were working on Shenmue as a whole. We know there's now like 1, 2, and they had to cut it into 2 chapters, and that announcement was made as early as March 99. So it's sort of gauging, in a sense, when these decisions were being made. So I'm assuming they would have been working on it in 98 and then maybe coming to the realization at the latter end of that year, start the next year, we're going to have to cut this game into 2 guys.
Yeah.
Potentially. Which makes sense because obviously we'd seen a lot of Shenmue 2 footage in these events, and sort of confirmation of that. And I don't... The 16 chapter thing, I don't know if that was ever properly confirmed. There was just that whiteboard thing, right?
Yeah, I remember that back in the day, and then obviously it's been confirmed through several sources since. Obviously it was 11 chapter game.
Yeah.
Obviously the 1 chapter per game thing's out the window, isn't it? Because obviously Shenmue 1 was chapter 1, we know that.
Yeah.
Chapter 2 was cut, which we all know about. Then Shenmue 2 had chapter 3, which was Wan Chai, chapter 4, which was Kowloon, and a little bit of chapter 5, which was Guilin. And then Shenmue 3 is definitely chapter 5, chapter 6, isn't it? At the bare minimum.
I'd say so, yeah.
And then you've obviously then got 5 more chapters to go. Although the chapter cards themselves, obviously things have moved around and since then as well, would have it at chapter 7. But I don't think it's quite at chapter 7 because obviously the train one's been moved. And that other one where you've got Yuanda Zoo and the 3 twins, or the triplets sat there rather, 3 twins, the triplets, that hasn't been used yet either. So
you've got like Shuzo, the train to Shuzo, Shanghai was at number 4. So there's a few things there, and then there's like also been discrepancies with like the books. So I believe when Suzuki was showing us those original scripts, there was like a script for Baisha.
Yeah, randomly.
And Baisha's not really a chapter in those original outlines, so seeing the script, obviously it must have been at some point, but like these different iterations, and then obviously we've got the boat chapter, which sets us up on part 2 of this article. But we are going to have a quick music break, sort of whet the appetite for that continuation of this article. So I'm going to be playing a piece of music from Anadil, who has actually created a series of metal covers of Shenmue tracks.
Ah, yes.
One of my favourites here. I really, really love the melody and groove in this, and the metal take on this song. So this is obviously from Shenmue 3. It's called Hide and Seek. Welcome back. That was Anadil with a metal cover for the song Hide and Seek. Really good stuff. Really, really enjoyed that. So, Matt, part 2 of the article that we're discussing here, and leads us nicely into the boat chapter, which again is another chapter that was cut, iteration. I don't know if it was originally intended to be the chapter 2, or I think that was the whiteboard, wasn't it? It was like 16 chapters. I think it had 1 and then 2 was like crossed out or something, or am I making that up in my head? I'm sure I've seen something where it was like
I
2 had been
vaguely,
taken out of the equation, hadn't it?
I vaguely remember you saying something like that. And on a side point, before we look at this little bit of text and the side story comic,
Yeah.
Obviously, it says like on the comic itself, Shenmue side story by Kenji Miyawaki at Sega AM2. Why they are not doing some of these now for some gaps for Shenmue 3 leading into Shenmue 4. I know they've got to pay people to do it, and I can understand there's a cost implication to it. But why are they not doing something like this now?
And how good his artwork is, Kenji Miyawaki. Like, get him on the go. Just get him to come up with some Shenmue mangas for us. Like,
I'll chuck him £100.
Exactly, but even like these side stories that are only like a couple of pages long, they just sort of whet the appetite and just sort of fill in some gaps. Like Shensun did a really decent comic, to be honest, with Shenmue World Issue 3 that sort of intended, obviously it's not canon, but intended to sort of fill in the gap from Landy's helicopter taking off at the end of the rooftop scene in Kowloon, and where Landy sort of ended up and why the stonemasons were there in the first place and what was going on with Shenhua's father. I think he did a great job of sort of filling in the blanks, even though obviously he's come up with that himself, and again it's not canon, but those sort of things can become canon if you've got the right people behind it. So if Kenji Miyawaki drew up a comic for the same sort of section of gameplay that we didn't see because obviously we were Ryo meeting Shenhua and all this is going on behind the scenes, or bits in Bailu Village, bits in Niaowu that we don't actually get to see, like it would be really cool as have a little bit of a side story comic on Shenhua being kidnapped by Niaos, on like what was going on there, what was her relationship with Li Feng at the time before she became Niao-sun, and those sort of things. If they hadn't got the budget to actually do those or develop those cutscenes for the game, get Kenji Miyawaki on the side, can you knock up a little bit of a comic to give people extra context to these events? It would have been so cool.
Because you could sell them, couldn't you? If you wanted to.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
my mental opinion. You could sell these for not a huge amount of money, but say a fiver for argument's sake. Yeah. And you could probably make the money back on the commission if you wanted to. And it just whet the appetite, wouldn't it, for future Shenmue titles? It would also, I think, maybe lend credence to the fact that if they started doing WoW manga form, that there would be a realistic fallback option as well. But anyway, I think they're just leaving a bit of money on the table. My opinion, just one man's opinion, obviously, but I think it's something that I think they should be exploring. But we'll see.
Yep.
But I'll go on to the boat chapter. So it says, when asked about the legendary chapter that takes place on the boat from Yokosuka to Hong Kong, Yu Suzuki is slightly wary. I don't want to say too much since I may make some use of it later, he says with a smile. During the journey, various incidents and encounters take place on board, which is where Ryo fights Chai again on the boat, saves a little girl, and everybody's happy. It's the girl you speak to as you come off the boat in Shenmue 2. And it refers to her being scared. That's why she's scared. And there's also a fan game out there that I did a video on, God knows, a few months ago now, which tries to replay those events as well. Takeuchi adds, the scenario has been written as a base, but that simply won't be used as is. We would then add things to it like fun gameplay elements and so on while thinking of the overall balance.
Would have been really cool to see it
I'd
in
love
game
to see
form.
it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't see how he can sort of, unless he's just taking the ideas of what could happen on a boat in a future title. Obviously, the little girl being kidnapped by Chai has happened.
Yes.
So, gameplay over graphics. So, Takeuchi explains that with the creations that aren't games, they draw people in through things like their visuals, their direction, and an interesting story. Similarly, at the same time, the first Shenmue was made, graphics in games were limited, so what was important was how the player interacts and how they become involved in the gameplay. Adds Suzuki, when it comes to graphics quality, there's no way we could compete with a 2-hour length film, whereas they might be able to spend 3 or 4 hours rendering a single frame, we have to process everything 200,000 times faster. But whilst we were at a disadvantage there, being an RPG, the way that we could stand out was with a game that slowly permeates across its 50-hour playtime.
It's interesting, isn't it? That it was obviously always intended to be a bit of a slow burn, I guess. But
yeah,
Although I'd argue Shenmue 2 probably moves things on a little bit faster in terms of the story content itself. But that's, neither here nor there. So then we come on to the significance of naming. So when the core development members were wondering to ourselves about what kind of game it's to be, Yu-san put forward the term free. I thought that it really fitted well, says Takeuchi. The game we were trying to make wasn't one that had existed before then, but was something that was completely new. The acronym FREE, for Full Reactive Eyes Entertainment, is a name that Suzuki chose, but his comments with a laugh that he overdid it a bit. It's fine as far as the full reactive part, but for the rest, I had to find something to fit each of the letters you see. Fair enough. Yeah. He did it. So there we go. It would seem that Yu Suzuki has a fondness for putting a name to his systems, such as the Magic Weather system and so on. Takeuchi responds, without naming a system in that way, the other developers on the team wouldn't have had the awareness that we were doing something new. Suzuki agrees. Giving that things a name is important. That's why we give things an identity. Someone once said, without giving something a name, it will just get lost in time, just as if it never existed. I've been playing a lot of open world games recently, said Takeuchi. I really want to emphasize here that I don't think Shenmue is open world. Shenmue is its own genre, and even now, I think that genre is free, which is interesting. I think I can get it to a point with the size of the world and the detail of Shenmue 1. I can see where they're coming from.
Yeah, I like the naming aspect that he's talking about. There's some good philosophy in there, actually.
I do. It's quite cool. And obviously makes it easier then for the development team to do their stuff. Then we talk a little bit about Shenmue 3 here. It says one system that has been incorporated into Shenmue 3 is the Point of Interest system, or POI system. The large town of Niaowu contains a large number of shops, and Suzuki explains that having all the non-playable characters visit any of the shops would not be very realistic. Instead, each of the characters has been given their own set of interests which align with their grouping, such as age, gender, and so on. A young person might be unlikely to visit the Buddhist stores, for example, but might be interested in the stores that sell jewellery. Wouldn't creating individual interests for each of the hundreds of characters in the town have been a next to impossible task? Yu smiles and says, it depends on how you see it. If thinking about aspects like this is even something you find enjoyable, then things have a way of getting done. It was even a bigger job in the past, so where every system had to build from nothing. Nowadays, it's more about how to adjust existing systems.
Right. I do like that. I didn't actually realise that the age of character and gender and so on was making such a difference in Niaowu, for example. Like, I guess it kind of makes sense. There's like women in the ladies' hairdressing area. I'm thinking, the wig shop or whatever. Maybe like a man in a shirt shop, which, I don't know, I guess stereotypically correct sort of thing. But I didn't actually realise that they'd gone out the way to program maybe like a kid going to a toy shop rather than some other type of shop that's along Vendor Avenue, for example. So that's cool.
Interesting. It's cool.
And then we've got a bit on Okiyasu's participation in Shenmue 3. So Keiji Okuyasu, who was sub-director for Shenmue 1 and 2, describes how he came to be involved in the development of Shenmue 3. I wasn't involved at all in the beginning. I saw the announcement on the internet just like everyone else, although I had heard rumours. Where did he hear them from then?
I guess the rumours that had just been floating around for the last 100 years at the time. He probably just heard all those rumours that we'd all heard and then
saw the forklift tweet or something.
Yeah.
In the following 6 months, the project Okuyasu had been working on finished. And he sent Suzuki an email to offer help with Shenmue 3. However, initially no response was forthcoming. He hadn't read my mail, and so I didn't get any reply, says Okuyasu, gesturing to Suzuki with a laugh. However, on trying again a month later, this time Suzuki called him back immediately and asked him to start the following day. He was definitely the person I most wanted to work with, but the reason I didn't reach out was him because I figured that he was in an important position. He was in an important position, and I didn't for the life of me imagine he would be able to join the team, explains Suzuki, referring to Okuyasu's position as president of his own company, Studio Fake. Okuyasu, for his part, had not participated working on the third game. I was with Sega for about 14 or 15 years, but Shenmue was the toughest thing I'd ever worked on. Me too, interjects Suzuki. Okuyasu had originally planned to just look forward to Shenmue 3 as a fan this time. Having been involved with the first 2 games and knowing somewhat what it would be about, I really just wanted to enjoy it as a player, he confesses. However, his conscience told him to contact Suzuki to see how the development was going. He was worried whether things were going okay or not, confirms Suzuki. Suzuki welcomed back the former development team member with open arms. I remember at one of the first meetings we had after I joined, relates Okuyasu, I didn't really know what was going on, but I was asked to give my opinion about something, and Suzuki seemed delighted, saying he really gets Shenmue.
It's interesting how they sort of come back together, isn't it? That way.
Like an original partnership almost.
And there's like a lot of respect there and goodwill to want to come back on board for something like Shenmue 3, which obviously not Sega anymore, different scope and the rest of it, so that's cool. Yeah. Now we come on to the origin of Find Chobu-chan. Now, everybody likes Chobu-chan.
Everyone loves Chobu-chan.
Yeah, you can criticise Shenmue 3 all you like, but Chobu-chan was bloody brilliant, and they really ought to play more off of this and use Chobu-chan more and more, sort of as little fun games. I imagine they own the Shenmue 3 IP, don't they, Wisenet? So why can't they use
Yeah, true. The Chobu-chan IP, yeah.
Yeah, so there we are. So it says the origin of Find Chobu-chan. Players of Shenmue 3 will be familiar with the way that a mascot bird character named Chobu-chan has been hidden somewhere in every one of the 140 or so shops. This came about from something Okuyasu had wanted to do since the original Shenmue games. The landscape of Shenmue 1 and 2 were both built with great realism, with none of the typical shortcuts taken as such as copy and pasting methods around due to Suzuki's intense dislike of such practices. Okay, it was amazing, but you could really do with it was to have a look at, which felt a bit of a shame. Back then, I'd wanted to make more use of it by having some kind of treasure hunt or something. I also proposed it during Shenmue 3 development. Things like this often take a backseat to the main story, but in this case, it seems Suzuki may have been working on it quietly, and one day he suddenly said to me, "It's ready, have a look." Regarding the choice of the mascot's name, Suzuki had given it some thought as to what to call it. Then, during the development, someone suggested, since the town's name was in Japanese was Chobu, why not go with just that? I said, "That'll do," says Suzuki. The Japanese diminutive suffix of chan was added to give Chobu-chan. Takeuchi comments that when he first heard about Chobu-chan, he was a bit dubious as whether it fitted Shenmue's world. But on realising it had a proper explanation and reason for existing within the world as a mascot for the Niaowu Tourism Association, he was convinced. Suzuki chuckles as he recalls one proposed hiding place for Chobu-chan that had to be forbid. At one point, Chobu-chan was going to be fried in a frying pan. I said, "Please don't fry Chobu-chan, that is one step too far." They seem to be having a bit of a laugh about that one as well.
Yeah. He does end up in like a bowl of rice. I remember
he
does. In the middle of that. You might even be getting cooked, right, in a basket of dumplings or something.
He is in a basket of dumplings. Yes, you are right.
As long as it's not a frying pan, I know, I guess.
Yeah, it's fine. Frying pan's too far.
Yeah. The Wooden Dummy Cafe. So one of the more unusual shops in Niaowu is a cafe at which Ryo can drink tea with wooden dummies. Was this unique idea something that Suzuki came up with himself? Suzuki confirms this with a nod. But when I looked into it, I found that this wooden cafe does actually exist somewhere over in Yokohama, I think it is. This causes laughter and comments of disbelief from the group. Suzuki goes on to clarify that in the real-life shop, the dummies aren't dressed up like they are in the game, however. They just sort of had wooden dummies standing there. At one of our formal weekly meetings where people report on progress and announce their next steps, Yusan suddenly said, "I'd like to put in a wooden dummy cafe." Everyone's mouth fell open. Takeuchi adds, Yusan's sudden proposals can be of two different types. There's the first type where he's thought everything through thoroughly, considering how it could be implemented technically and so on. Then there's the second type where he will just come up with an idea because it's something that he's currently interested in. So I was asking myself which type this was. I haven't done all the things I want to do yet. They will have to be for next time, says Suzuki with a smile. Hopefully there is a next time, Suzuki.
Yeah. Well, fingers crossed. We're trying our best, aren't we?
Yeah, snail racing, etc. That was quite quick, but I did propose another little music break before we go into the final part of this article.
Yes.
We've got a piece of music from Ryo X. This is his latest release that was included on the Shenmue World Issue 3 accompaniment CD, which was obviously Shenwave Collection Volume 2. Actually named after the magazine, it's Shenmue World. Welcome back. That was Rio X's Shenmue World track. Awesome track. You can also find a music video for that over on the Dojo YouTube channel. And he does have a second track coming very soon. Waiting on that to be finished and completed. And that will also appear on the Dojo channel as and when it's finished. But let's move directly into part 3 now, Matt, the final part. Let's wrap up this
let's nail
cool
this
discussion article.
So this is on Shenmue 1 and 2's drinks machines. So Okuyasu recounts that the thing that surprised him the most when he was working on the first 2 Shenmue games was when Suzuki wanted to put in drinks machines. They didn't have any meaning with respect to the gameplay you see. You put your money in, the can drops down, you drink it, and that's all. However, he saw the sense in Suzuki's thinking that drink machines are a common sight for a town, and buying a drink from one is something you might do if you had some pocket change. There needs to be some consumption in order to create a cycle, explains Suzuki, making a circular motion in the air. My intention when I created them was to form a cycle by connecting several such small elements together, although in practice I wasn't quite able to reach that point. Were the winning cans a part of this? To some extent, yes, as motivation for the players to continue buying cans, you nods.
I guess he always wanted that sort of Shenmue 3-esque economy system. It's just how to implement that in, well, I guess in the real world, because obviously in Japan, there is obviously with the pachinko machines, there's somewhat of a recycling of money where you spend money to play these pachinko machines and then you win tokens to buy a prize, and then you take the prize to a shop who buys it off you for money. So there's like some sort of a weird cycle economy wise there that's kind of what you got in Shenmue 3 in terms of gambling. You get tokens, use the tokens to buy a prize and then sell the prize. Whereas obviously in Shenmue 1, I don't feel like that system would have worked. So I do get the realistic aspect that you could just buy a drink, you can just have a drink. There's no real in-game use for it, apart from the odd time where you might win a winning can, which you can then take to either the Abe store or the Tomato Convenience store and get it traded for a capsule toy prize or go on the raffle. So yeah, I do personally like that, and I like that it sort of adds that layer of realism that even though it's not particularly like an economy system as such where it's forcing you to spend the money that you've accumulated, it's more of a choice for the player just to sort of immerse themselves into the world better.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that.
So moving on to Shenmue 3's world now. So with Shenmue 3, has there been any easing or shift from the true-to-life portrayal of its world seen in the first 2 games towards one where fun is of a greater priority? According to Takeuchi, Shenmue 3 was about making sure that the game is fun and immersive and expanding the range of things that the players can do. According to the Shenmue Bible that Yu Suzuki carries inside his head. For a moment there, I thought they were going to say like on paper, and I was like, oh, I want that Bible.
Yeah, I was like, give it here now,
Yeah.
I'll read it.
But it's in his head apparently. Carries inside his head of what is permitted in a Shenmue game and what is not. So Okuyasu comments that with Shenmue 1 and 2, the development team leads were always being told to focus on portraying things accurately as they actually exist rather than just treating it as a game. With Shenmue 3, that thinking has not completely changed, but this time Suzuki's guidance has been that it's fine to include various fun elements as long as the world's sense of immersion is not broken. So Suzuki explains that there was a big difference in available resources this time. When it comes down to it, Shenmue is not a real story but a game. Not a movie or anything else, it's a game at its core. Due to the limited resources, decisions had to be made about how many people to use on what areas. Suzuki says that he focused on apportioning the developer resources, what resources to devote to what aspects. An example he gives is that devoting half the team just to graphics might have had a detrimental effect on the gameplay. So even if some compromise might be needed on the graphics, I wanted to make sure it had fun gameplay, says Suzuki. Adding, with Shenmue, the thing that is an absolute must is that it be immersive. So I focused the resources on that and creating interesting gameplay.
It's tricky, isn't it, with budget management with Shenmue 3?
Especially the team size for Shenmue 3 being...
much reduced team.
Vastly reduced, yeah.
A budget that wasn't ever static either. I know WiseNet made some odd decisions in some of the things they did in Shenmue 3, and the lack of story content's obviously the glaring one, I guess.
Yeah.
But they also have to attribute they were working with a smaller team and other factors there as well. So they clearly thought about what they wanted to do and what they felt was right for the game. Whether it translated completely that way into the final product, who knows? But they obviously had an idea of how they wanted to divide the resources up and knew they had to make compromises, which was always going to be the case with a kickstarted Shenmue 3. Obviously, Deep Silver came on board later, but it didn't have anything near the budget of Shenmue 1 and 2. So there's always going to be compromises, which are actually probably touched on a little bit here when we come on to the motion capture.
It's true. I mean, I don't know if it's a good thing or not that he sort of went against some of the morals that he had on the original 2 games and essentially treated it more like a game rather than I feel like originally he treated it as like a blockbuster. Obviously he's getting these novelists in, these screenwriters, directors, movie people in and stuff like that. So he had such a big vision for what Shenmue was to be. And then in Shenmue 3 here, he's treating it more like a game, and that like the priority is it being fun first, which I do get, and maybe he's thinking on sort of broader terms of trying to get more people into Shenmue as well. Like it could have been a decision that led him to think like, if we make this game more accessible and more gamey and more fun, it might bring more of an audience than it did in the past. I don't know what the thinking was, or team size wise, he sort of knew that he didn't have enough of a team to go that extra mile, and maybe he just sort of wanted, at least let's make a game that is functionable, is fun to play, and is Shenmue, which definitely is what they created.
Yeah, and I guess, again, I'm reading between the lines here. I don't know how true this is or not. This is just what I'm reading. But they focused on those gameplay elements first before putting the story together, or if they had put the story together before implementing it, which is why I think it would have benefited for a bit from another year in the oven, because I think then they could have nailed the story elements they wanted to. But the way things worked and times and everything else around it obviously meant it came out in November 2019. Now, I think, again, I'm going over old ground here a little bit. The Shenmue 3 story is the weakest element of that game by a mile. We know that. It's very obvious. And for Shenmue 4, it cannot afford to do what Shenmue 3 did in terms of the story content, because if it does, I think that will kill it. That will kill the franchise forever. That will be Shenmue done and dusted, because you can't come back from that twice, in my opinion.
The good thing is that they've got the gameplay now. They've got the fun aspect that he's looking for. Exactly. So if you can just add that extra element on now with the budget for whatever they need to create a Shenmue 4 with, team size wise, they can start devoting team members to those story-based aspects, we'd hope.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the point I'm making here. While it may have been a misstep back then, potentially, because obviously we're not at Shenmue 4 at the moment, and it did annoy a portion of the fan base, which I can understand. You've got those systems now, you've got the engine now. It wouldn't take a huge amount, I think, to upgrade everything into Unreal 5 if they wanted to go and do that for a Shenmue 4. But the biggest plea here, and I know we're digressing, but the biggest plea here for Shenmue 4, and if anybody at Wisenet or anyone else is listening to this who has any influence, it has to be story focused. Use the systems from 3, polish them, add in your throw moves, we'll talk about them in a minute, of course, and then just smash that story out the park. Nail that story on a Shenmue 2 level, and I promise you, people will come flooding back. Those people that may have felt they got stung by Shenmue 3 will come running back if the story is good. And I stand by it.
Agree. And they've got a chance to slightly rectify some of the aspects of 3.
Yes.
By, sort of mentioning them at the start of 4. It's not like it's everything that happened in 3 has happened. They can always sort of backtrack a little bit, like I say, again, treading on old ground, but have the game start back in Bailu and have a proper talk with Shenmue's father, and let's get some of the questions asked that we want to know, that we were hoping to find out in Shenmue 3. That can still happen in Shenmue 4. It's not the end all be all that Shenmue 3 didn't have that story at the time. Shenmue 4 can rekindle those story beats and get us back on track.
Yeah, and that's all it needs to do. Smash the story, and I think we're not going to be far off, and just maybe modernise some things and polish some things. But we've digressed. So I'll go on to motion capture now. It says here, I hear people saying the movements of the characters look a bit stiff, Suzuki acknowledges. Of course, I'm aware of what's required for them to look completely natural with a proper studio setup and go through all the steps involved like the other development companies. But if we were to have done that for Shenmue 3, I know we've only to include about a tenth of all the motions I felt were needed. So it came down to a decision to accept 80% rather than going for 100% in order to achieve this magnitude of difference.
Okay.
Almost all of the motion capture was carried out at WiseNet, says Suzuki, as outsourcing this was severely limited the amount of motions that could have been realised. In the end, we were able to achieve something distinctive, so I'm happy with the result. So again, it sort of feeds into the whole factor here and the Kickstarter picture where they're doing the fighting engine motion capture in the WiseNet offices about 2 yards away from a fax machine they could have put their foot through. That they had to do this all in-house. So again, it's a compromise they had to make due to the budgetary constraints that they had at the time.
Which is quite insane, really, because I've obviously been inside the WiseNet's offices and had a feel for the space in those rooms. And yeah, basically the amount of room that they would have had for this motion capture device or whatever they were doing, considering they were doing proper full-on kicks and charges in terms of the body check and all this sort of stuff going on, that they would have had to capture motion-wise. Yeah, lacking space in those offices for sure, especially amongst the desktop setups or whatever they would have had going alongside there. Perhaps some of those would have had to be moved to make some space. So obviously they were working on the job in a sense, like they haven't got access or the luxury of like a proper motion capture studio if they're doing it in-house. It's crazy really what they were able to accomplish, which is why he's probably quite satisfied with the result, because how restricted they were, they did manage to get something that worked really well.
You look at the motion capture for the cutscenes where you've got the body check, as you said, the fight with Landy at the end, which is choreographed magnificently. I don't care who you are and what you like about Shenmue 3 or not. That scene is shot brilliantly, and the motion capture in that is perfect. It's brilliant. So they managed with quite modest technology and modest budget in that regard to achieve some quite high quality stuff. It's just inconsistent because of the budget and because things had to be cut, moved around, compromises made. But now you've got those systems, you can polish some of those up and maybe lose some of those compromises going forward.
Definitely. So let's have a little look at the reason why throw moves were omitted then in the first place. So Suzuki talks about the motion capture technology that was used. So the sensors we use now for in-house motion capture aren't the optical type. They're ones which contain various accelerometers and gravity sensors, and they're quite large. If they're slammed against the ground when someone is thrown, they could break or the actor might get injured. So that's why throws were left out, Suzuki jokes, causing laughter amongst the group. He goes on to clarify that there's something that may be put into the next game. I had to give up on them this time because of resource constraints. It was a question of obtaining the right balance. If we had put throw moves in, the total amount of motion animations we could have included might have been reduced to 10%, says Suzuki. The motions improved remarkably over time when I was playtesting, adds Takeuchi. Yu-san told me that if I found any motions that didn't feel quite right, they would be fixed up. So yeah, there you have it, Mark. So I think this is probably the interview, because we've spoken about this quite a few times now. We mentioned like how they were worried about breaking the equipment that they essentially hired, because they didn't go out of the way to buy this equipment. I don't think. I think it was like a hire thing, so they didn't want to break them or whatever this technology is and was or whatever was capable of injuring people as well. So that's definitely the reason why. So.
Yeah, so that clarifies that at least. Again, another compromise that had to be made, unfortunately.
But he does say that he's got some idea of what he wants to do for the next game.
He does. And I know he's spoken in several interviews since this that he wants to put throw moves back into Shenmue 4. So he must have some idea of how he wants to do it, which we'll just have to see how it pans out, I guess.
It would be good if he did, and then he could potentially patch them back into 3 somehow. I don't know if that's a possibility.
Maybe.
Now it's under in. Maybe
this work.
Yeah, true.
So we come on to Shenhua's costumes. So the artwork James, that we were talking about at the top of the show, it looks like it's the artwork of Shenhua in her random costumes from the calendar. So it says, among the pieces of early concept art on display on the table in front of the group are some of Shenhua holding a basket of vegetables with April written on one side. What sorts of situations do these illustrate?
Since lovely, aren't they?
Brilliant.
I'd love to get my hands on these as well.
Yeah, I would. Well, you never know, do you, these days? Could end up somewhere. Yeah. Since she's a key character, I want to give an idea of the kind of life she lives. After all, unlike some old movies, people don't wear all the same clothes all the time. So, as an example, I thought of designing different costumes she wears from January through to December. They help to give a deeper understanding of Shenhua, says Suzuki. This is one of 12 costume designs, the April Shenhua, which is then the similar CG images from the Shenmue calendar, which looks pretty similar to the image that's in the sketches, actually. Mm-hmm. But in the end, these costumes weren't actually used in the games. While it might be nice to have her wear them if there's a chance, says Suzuki, there's something in the latest game for Shenhua to change her costume as DLC. Next, a question is put that many fans have been wondering: what was the reason for Shenhua's change of costume from what she wore in Shenmue 2?
Nice. This is a question that I've always had.
And I've never remembered his answer, actually, until reading it just now. Yep. I've made some changes to the details of Ryo's clothes too, points out Suzuki. Back then, hardware limitations prevented us from portraying the fine details of the textures. Nowadays, with physics rendering, it opens up the opportunities for more nuanced expression. With Shenhua's old costume design, we were only really able to show the texture of the cloth. This time we've put in details like leather stitching along with embroidered patterns. I wanted to give her a slightly more femininity, so I made some modifications to give her a slightly more fashionable Shenhua. So it's very much an aesthetics thing as well as a technical thing by the looks of it.
It is interesting because he always did say how much of a tomboy type of character Shenhua was, so to want to give her more femininity is sort of a slight character trait change, very slightly, I guess. How she's got like earrings and she does very much not like she's a girly girl, because she's still in that sort of defined clothing that she's recognizable as Shenhua. She's got the beret on, the trousers and whatnot. You don't look at her and think she's not Shenhua, she's a different character. She still looks like Shenhua, so you can kind of see some of the ideas he had there as like I mean, I don't personally like the costume design for continuity's sake, and obviously Shenhua is iconic as Shenhua was, but I do kind of get it at the same time.
When you look at anime Shenhua, it's an amalgamation of the two.
True, yeah.
It's very much like both those costumes have been amalgamated, leaned slightly more towards her original costume, but it definitely takes influence from the Shenmue 3 costume, without a doubt.
At the best of both worlds.
Yeah, absolutely.
Story in Shenmue 3. Shenmue 1 and 2 introduced an increasing number of unresolved story elements as the game progressed. Without giving too much away, does Shenmue 3 start to address these? To me, it sounds like Ezra's probably played the game and he's got perhaps some of the kind of few little concerns that all the fans have had with the story and, Shenhua's model redesign and all this sort of stuff. No throw moves, and he's tailored the interview to potentially get answers for like why. Maybe why there's not so much story. So this question here, without giving too much away, does Shenmue 3 start to address these? So let's see what he says anyway. So Okuyasu reprimanded me about that, chuckles Suzuki. He told me, Yu-san, you can't go on like this with an ever-growing number of mysteries. They have to be resolved. Okuyasu confirms this with a nod. He always wants to add more mysteries, he says, gesturing towards a laughing Suzuki. He loves putting in new ones. Then he tells me, I'll leave it over to you to get them resolved. That won't do. What did he add, mystery-wise?
I mean, you got the mystery of the Niao-san betrayal, obviously, and that side of things. But beyond that, you learn a little bit about the mirrors, the 1910 stuff, the envoy to Bailu Village.
Yeah, I guess the Emperor stuff is a little bit new.
Don't get a massive amount of answers on Awao's time in China and Bailu Village, so there's that's not really been particularly resolved either.
I'd say nothing's been resolved as such. Just a few little lines added onto, like the mirrors in someone else's hands now. Landy's move to the Cliff Temple.
Yeah, knowing Landy was definitely taken in by the Chu men as a child, that was quite a big deal. Obviously, Rio lost the mirror, that's a big deal.
I suppose Shenmue's father's been resolved. That's one
Yeah,
storyline that's been
we
resolved.
know that's been sorted out. The Niao son betraying Landy and that side of things, and the infighting with the Chu men. That's sort of a new thing that's been introduced. I mean, I've said this 1,000 times publicly, and I'll say it again. Shenmue 3 does move the story on, because those things happen. We know they happen. It just happens right at the end of the game with a lack of execution around them to make them feel like important events, if that makes sense. Whereas Shenmue 2, the things happen, but you have everything else building around it. So that big crescendo at the end with the rooftop fight, and then obviously in the cave at the end. So you have sort of two big sort of crescendos. Shenmue 3 doesn't have that build up to those final points. It does. So then the things that do happen are lost because you don't seem to remember everything building up to it. It fell a bit flat because of it. Whereas in a 4, if they can move the story on in a Shenmue 2 type way and really build that story element up and build those characters and everything up, I think you'd be fine. But it says to me here that they got caught in I wouldn't say conflict, but caught between not even a rock and a hard place, caught between a decision, and they probably went too far towards the gameplay side of things, where some people would argue, whether you like Shenmue 3 or not, that some of the gameplay elements are far better than the original 2 games. The Stamina system can do one, but we'll leave that. We'll part of that for another day. But they didn't lean into the story enough, and then it's like, what balance do you find? And I think they probably went too far towards the gameplay and not enough towards the story. Had they had more time, maybe they would have done more story. I don't know. But you can see the thought process maybe as to where or how it's ended up the way it did at the end. I think this is quite an enlightening interview in that regard. They've made some good decisions in terms of gameplay. They've made some bad decisions in terms of the gameplay and the story, in my opinion. But then that's why it comes out as a mixed bag, sort of 7 out of 10 game at the end of it. And actually, I think that's why Yu Suzuki himself recognised it as sort of a 7 out of 10 game as well. So there's plenty of lessons here to be learned. And I just hope they learn them or have learned them. They've had all the feedback. We know this. Ryan Payton said that himself, and he's said it many a time over time. So I'm just hoping they've learned the lessons from Shenmue 3. So if the opportunity for 4 does happen, they go, right, smash the story, nail the story. I'm going to say it again, nail the bloody story.
Yeah, I think what's quite telling from this interview is how things have sort of come full circle. It's like not that they've created Shenmue 3 and they completely forgot how to make a game like a Shenmue game. It's evident from some of the answers they're giving here. They remember working on Shenmue 1 and 2. They remember what it took. You know, they had to remake it twice. They had to get movie directors in, people in. Yu Suzuki created this brand new genre called Free. There was all these systems they had to work on and implement to get, you know, the data on the discs at a reasonable level to actually run these games. They had to split the game into 2. It's not stuff that they've forgotten. They know how to make a Shenmue game. It's just having enough of a team capable of making said game. Like, Suzuki can only do so much, which is why he got this Okuyasu guy back, and he was like very grateful for this guy coming back because he gets Shenmue. And I think that's probably what's lacking, the amount of people in the staff that either were original developers or people that get Shenmue, and it takes a full team of people that get Shenmue to make a future Shenmue game feel like a Shenmue game. Shenmue 3 feels like a Shenmue game, but it's just lacking where, you know, those staff members that worked on the original 2 would have taken it from how it feels now into, like, you know, your 10 out of 10 type of Shenmue game that we're all hoping for. So it's not that they don't know these things. It's very clear from this interview. Yu Suzuki knows his limitations and what he wants, and he's just had to sort of, obviously using the budget, tweak what he wants out of the game to make it work. He wants to make it fun because he knows that out of what he can actually do within the game with his team of staff members that are working on this is at least make it a fun game to play. You know, despite its limitations, I think they did a really good job, and like you said, Matt, hopefully they can then take that husk of a game that they've worked on and built on and take that to the next level with Shenmue 4 and like I say, I think this interview is really good at showing that sort of full circle moment from the roots 20 plus years ago at this point to where they are now. It's clear that Yu Suzuki, he wants more. He's just limited with what he could have done for Shenmue 3.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we come on to our final comment. Sataki, she says, reaching the end is naturally a main objective for any game, but Shenmue is more than that. To me, Shenmue is what you might call an environment game. It's a soothing game, and the more you become pulled into its world, the more you realise what sets it apart from other games. Okayasu goes on to say, one big difference with Shenmue 3 compared to Shenmue 1 and 2 is that this time we had several development staff who were fans of the original games. They gave various presentations to use and encouraged the inclusion in Shenmue 3 of the parts they loved about them most from those games. So in that sense, players who also enjoyed the first two games are sure to be able to enjoy the new one also. And then Yu Suzuki goes on to say, I think a lot of people want to know how the story continues. But I feel sad if anyone decides to give up on getting stuck partway through a game, for example, at a battle request. We're in an era now where you don't need to remain stuck needlessly. You can look for help on the net or adjust your difficulty settings. For those people who get stuck but want to know what happens, you can make use of the easy setting within the game. I really hope everyone plays through to the end and you can find the other parts to enjoy on your second play.
Very good, very good. And then the interview ends here, or the discussion as it were, ends with a nice message from Master Wu. So again, another full circle moment. So obviously this is the guy that Yu Suzuki all those years ago went on his China research trip and met and sort of fell in love with his martial arts teachings and whatnot, which is essentially the basis for, well, at the time Virtua Fighter 2, but what became Virtua Fighter RPG and Shenmue, of course, with all the Bajikon and whatnot. So it says, a frame hangs on the wall behind Yu Suzuki with the words, congratulations on Shenmue, written within. So Suzuki explains that this was a congratulatory message written for him for Shenmue 3 by his good friend and renowned Bajikwan expert, Master Wu Li Shu. They first met many years ago when Suzuki was researching Bajikwan for the character of Akira in Virtua Fighter, and Master Wu also advised for Shenmue 1 and 2. They met recently at a martial arts event and again enjoyed drinking Chinese liquor together. He transformed into a drunken master, joke Suzuki. He says he visits Japan 2 or 3 times a year and we still meet up from time to time, which is really, really nice. And there's a photograph of Master Wu and Suzuki that was in 2015. Awesome stuff.
Brilliant. There we go. That takes us to the end of the 3-parter.
That is the end of a 3-part series that we've just covered in one foul swoop. Matt. Yeah, really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it. Some real nice insights into obviously the development of Shenmue 3, but ultimately where these particular 3 team members were all the way back in the Sega Saturn / Dreamcast days. Hopefully you've enjoyed that, guys, along with us as well. So Matt, I suppose that leads us to the end of the show and allows you to do your usual outro spiel before we get into a final piece of music, again from Anadil. It's going to be another metal cover that you can enjoy in a moment. But yeah, take it away, Matt.
Right, so first and foremost, I've got to remember how to do this now. It's been a little while since I've done this. Couple of months, so I'm out of practice. So first and foremost, guys, on the 4th of every month, the hashtag Let's Get Shenmue 4, we get trending on X and Blue Sky. Join us at 8 p.m. UK time, 3 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Europe and midday Pacific time to tweet the same message at the same time to get the hashtag Let's Get Shenmue 4 trending over on X and Blue Sky. If you're unsure how to participate, there will be a video link in the YouTube description below to make sure you can catch out how you participate and why we carry out the tweetathons in the way that we do. Don't forget, you can find us on pretty much any social media platform these days. Starting with X, we are Shenmue_Dojo, Instagram Shenmue_Dojo, Facebook Shenmue Dojo, Twitch Shenmue Dojo, Blue Sky ShenmueDojo.com, YouTube Shenmue Dojo VOD. We're actually on TikTok, believe it or not, Shenmue Dojo as well. And I think that covers all of the socials, apart from our website, ShenmueDojo.com, and the forums, ShenmueDojo.com/forums, where you can go for all your Shenmue-related discussion and see the media section with all the artworks that we will be scanning and putting up in due course. Or if you want a more immediate sort of chat, you can join us on our Discord with a link in the description below as well. And don't forget, give us a subscribe on the YouTube channel, and if you want to become a member for £2 a month, you get all the Saturday videos ahead of time, and all the money that is made goes to the competitions and the site running costs that James and I incur. And thank you to everybody in the Shenmue community who comes out day after day, week after week, month after month, supporting the tweetathon, supporting the content, supporting the dojo, supporting the community, and just making sure that Shenmue stays relevant and stays alive. And we will get Shenmue 4 eventually.
Hear, hear. And also, thank you to Radio Sega for consistently playing our episodes on their airwaves and the guest spots. Just wanted to give you guys a little mention as well, because we really appreciate that as well. And everyone in the Shenmue community for all of your support. So with that, we're going to take it away with this last piece of music. Thanks very much for listening, guys, and we'll see you soon for an upcoming show where we delve into more of these awesome Shenmue artworks that I can't wait to get into along with you, Matt. It's going to be some great discussions coming very soon, guys. So keep an eye out for those very, very soon. So it's a goodbye from me.
That's goodbye from me.
See you later, guys.
Take it easy.
Oh, look at the time.